here in Silicon Valley for 30 years. Otaku included not just people like me, but also maybe women and minorities, people who didn't go to Harvard or Stanford, and plenty of people in other countries and other markets. So I felt like one part of our mission was to bring the ideas of Silicon Valley and capital and access to Silicon Valley to people who didn't always, get access to those opportunities.
Interesting.
投資家地球紀行
Today we have a special guest, David McClure, the founder of 500 Startup. Yay! Yeah, I'm very honored to be able to interview you. So Japanese people, he is a legend of Silicon Valley. He are a well-known venture capitalist and entrepreneur who has invested in over 1,000 startups and helped many of them succeed. You are also the founder of 500 Startups and the leading global venture capitalist firm and a frequent speaker and mentor in the tech industry. And you are famous in Silicon Valley and the IT industry in the world. But business people outside of the IT industry in Japan may only know your name and not much about you. So could you introduce yourself?
Sure. 日本人、こんにちは。デーブです。I'm a venture capitalist here in Silicon Valley. I've lived here in Silicon Valley for about 30 years. So I'm kind of a oji-san, little old guy. But I came here when I was in my 20s, around 1989. And originally I was a software engineer programmer. And then later I got to be an entrepreneur and had a small company, and we got acquired. And then gradually I started learning more about investing and worked at PayPal and started doing angel investing, and I can tell you all about that, but the real story is I've been a nerd here in Silicon Valley for 30 years, otaku here in Silicon Valley, and it's been a lot of ups and downs. I think right now we're probably going through a little bit of a tough period in Silicon Valley. This is probably third downturn that I've lived through. But Silicon Valley always figures out a way to get itself back together, and over the last 30 years really been my incredible pleasure to be involved with technology companies here in Silicon Valley as an employee, as an entrepreneur running a company, as an investor in companies. Now I kind of work a little bit more with other VCs more than companies, but have kind of worn a lot of different hats in
Interesting.
And Silicon Valley is just a really interesting place. A lot of people trying to do crazy things. They don't always succeed, but every once in a while they do. And we hope to just have more of that happen in the future.
So I'm very happy to know that you are originally in software engineer.
Originally, yes.
Yeah.
I can't do much coding these days, but maybe a long time ago.
So I would also was an engineer.
Okay.
And started my company as an entrepreneur. So now I invest in the Web3 industry. So I want to learn from you more.
I don't know if I have much to teach at this point. I'm becoming an old guy. It's all these young kids that are doing cool stuff.
But in today's interview,
yes.
We want to focus on your investment experience.
Okay.
And I want to learn from you more about that. So before going to that topic, so could you let me know why did you think of starting 500 Startups?
Well, I wasn't originally coming from a finance or investment background. Most of my training in school was in mathematics and computer science and engineering. But when you live in the Valley, you kind of get to experience different parts of the tech ecosystem. So I kind of started as an engineer, but then I started seeing people work on companies, and so I wanted to learn more about being an entrepreneur. And then when you're an entrepreneur, you learn about investors, and you want to learn about how to be an investor. And I think it just, you gradually get to know a lot of different pieces of how things work around here. But I didn't really get to start being an investor until after I worked at PayPal. Actually, I was on the marketing side at that time. So I joined PayPal in 2001, just a little bit before the company went public, and got to work there with some amazing folks, Peter Thiel and Max Levchin, Reid Hoffman. It was really an amazing company. We were coming out of a downturn at that time also. This was almost that was 22 years ago or so. The dot-com boom and explosion kind of bust had just happened. But PayPal was a really special place. A lot of very talented people. The company was one of the first companies that went public after the downturn in 2001. And so a lot of people at PayPal, I guess, were interested in investing because maybe Peter Thiel and Reid Hoffman were active angel investors. A lot of us also were following what they were doing.
Yeah, they are called as a PayPal Mafia.
PayPal Mafia, right? Yes, they are very successful, very famous. Peter invested in early days of Facebook. He was a founder of Founders Fund. That was a VC firm that I later got to work at also. Reid was the founder CEO of LinkedIn, and also was at Greylock, another VC firm.
Oh, I know.
And then maybe a few other people, Roelof Botha, who was the CFO for PayPal when we went public, but he later joined Sequoia Capital and was an investor in YouTube. And YouTube was started by some other folks at PayPal, Steve Chen and Jao Karim and Chad Hurley. So just a lot of really amazing companies, entrepreneurs and investors that came out of PayPal. And really great place to have, learned and grown up. And then I also wanted to start doing investing. So probably around 2003 or 4, I started doing a little bit of investing as well. And that was kind of initially as an angel investor. So it wasn't my full-time job. I was still for other startups and advising and helping people. But I started maybe about $250,000, $300,000 invested in about 10 to 13 startups. But I was writing small checks at the time, maybe just 10 to 25K per company. But I started getting interested in companies. I didn't know as much about investing, but I had some experience. Had some experience as an engineer, had some experience as marketing, and so got to see several companies and invested in a few that did pretty well. SlideShare was one of those companies. They were later acquired by LinkedIn. Mint.com was another company that invested in that was acquired by Intuit. Got to work with some of those founders and help them. And I kind of decided, hey, I think I like the investing side. And so then I tried to start my own firm in 2008. And unfortunately, that was when the Lehman crisis and the global financial crisis. So not the best time to try and start a VC fund. So I wasn't able to at that time. And then I joined, Sean Parker had hired me to work at Founders Fund with Peter Thiel and some others. And so I got the chance to work starting in 2008. I got to work with Founders Fund for a little while. And they gave me a budget of about $3 million, $3 million. And I started doing investments a little bit larger than my angel investments. And we got very lucky. We invested in several companies pretty early that later did well. Twilio was one of those companies. Credit Karma was another one of those. They were acquired by Intuit for about $9 billion. Lyft, the company that does ride sharing, was an early investment. And another company called SendGrid, later acquired by Twilio. But that really gave me a taste for investing, my first experiences. And after that, I decided I wanted to start my own firm. And so we started 500 Startups back in 2010. And kind of at the time, the name was a little crazy. People used to laugh a little bit because that was just a very large number compared to most other funds where usually only investing in maybe 20 or 30 companies at one time. So that was a little bit different.
What were the differences between the other funds and startups at that moment?
Well, I think my experiences both with my angel investing and working with Founders Fund was, we got to see a lot of great companies, but most of them didn't work out. And so I kind of felt like, well, maybe a larger portfolio would do better because we'd have more chances to invest in companies. That was a pretty different idea than most other people thought. We also thought there was an opportunity to invest in companies outside Silicon Valley and other parts of the world. And that was also kind of different. Most people at the time were still focused just on investing in the US, really even just investing in and around the Bay Area. So kind of, I think the big differences for us were we were investing in a large number of companies. Every fund was several hundred companies. We were investing a lot of our capital in different countries around the world, not just in the Valley. And we also ran kind of an accelerator program similar to maybe Y Combinator, Techstars, and others. But we also helped start a bunch of other small funds. So even though 500 Startups was one fund, we also started about 20 other small funds, both in the US and in different parts of the world.
I see. So starting your own investment fund is a kind of starting a new business.
Very, very difficult.
Yeah,
yes, and I was both an investor and an entrepreneur. I was starting a VC firm. Actually, most people who are VCs don't start VC firms. They join other existing VC firms.
In terms of starting the new startups, so we need to have a differentiation against other competitors, and also we need to have a vision or mission.
Correct. Yes.
So what was 500 Startup mission or vision?
Well, I think we felt like there were a lot of talented entrepreneurs that were being overlooked. In US, we call them maybe underdogs. They're not necessarily the biggest dog, but they have a lot of fight. And so I had grown up in West Virginia and came to a state called West Virginia. You know, not so many entrepreneurs in West Virginia. And so I came to California and lots of computers, technology, investors, and very rich history. But I felt like I was outsider. And so it took me a while to kind of learn about the Valley. And then most people I saw who were getting money were people who went to very famous schools, Harvard or Stanford or MIT, and all these investors who went to business schools and had MBAs. And I didn't go to those schools. I didn't have an MBA. I kind of felt like maybe there was an opportunity to invest in people who were overlooked. And so that included not just people like me, but also maybe women and minorities and people who didn't go to Harvard or Stanford, and plenty of people in other countries and other markets. And so I felt like one part of our mission was to bring the ideas of Silicon Valley and the capital and access to Silicon Valley to people who didn't always, get access to those opportunities.
Interesting.
Another thing was, the story about investing globally. That was a big part of it. We felt like there was a ton of opportunity to do the same things that happened in Silicon Valley in other parts of the world. And we were starting to see other parts of the world that had success. I think certainly in some parts of Europe, maybe in Israel, probably in late 90s and early 2000s, maybe a little bit in China also. But still many parts of the world were undeveloped, young, large populations, and plenty of opportunity, plenty of talent.
I see. And there were less access to the capital.
Right, because there weren't as many people investing in venture capital in different parts of the world. Even here in the US, in parts of the US wasn't as much access to capital. And then, like I said, I think just really helping, build a large portfolio, which was kind of a different way to go about making lots of little bets, is what we said. And because we knew that there would be lots of failure, maybe we start out with 100, investments at early stage, seed stage, we say. Maybe 30% of those maybe get to Series A, maybe 30%, 40% of those get to Series B or later. So you might really only have 5 to 10 companies out of 100 that make it big. If you look at the data that we have from our first 3 funds, over 1,000 companies, about 3% of our companies got to sort of billion-dollar unicorn or IPO status. So that's only 3 out of 100 companies.
Wow.
Is tough odds.
Okay. So I believe that you had some strict criteria or policies to select the company you want to invest in.
A lot of people thought we didn't have strict policies because we invested in so many companies. They say, "Oh, you just spray and pray. You don't really do any selection," and that's not true. We still had a process. When you're investing in very early stage companies, just a couple people, 2 or 3 people maybe, they're still working on their product. It might not be very far along. You don't have a lot of things to look at. Mostly you get to meet the person. Maybe you look a little bit at what they built. Maybe there's some users or customers, but probably not too many. So you kind of have to still make a decision based on your gut instinct.
Yeah.
But you know you're going to be wrong a lot of the time, right? And so that again played into this story. Well, you know, maybe I'm not a very good soccer player, so I need to take a lot of shots on goal because only a few are going to go in.
Okay. The number of investment was a key of success.
Right. So one of the biggest strategies was not always, you know, hey, what questions do we ask and how far along the business, but just trying to find people that have some level of success, but knowing they still have many years to go and they have a lot of challenges to figure out. And so we try and start with kind of a wide funnel, and then we expect that, you know, each stage, a few people will make it to the next stage, but not everyone.
Okay. So still, even though you had some strict policies,
we usually would look at companies that had some kind of functional product, although maybe early, and some amount of users or customers.
Okay.
So different risk if you're starting completely from idea than if you have prototype or beta product, and different level risk if you just have prototype or beta product but no customers, right? So things that were really important to us were, can they build a product, and can they get users or customers?
Okay. If you are still active investor in the startups, what kind of criteria do you take?
Well, when we look at companies that are getting started, you know, we kind of want to understand what problems they're trying to solve, and do they have familiarity solving those kinds of problems? Have they built products before? Have they been able to sell to customers before? Have they been able to hire other people? So probably, you know, things that really matter are, you know, product development, engineering, design. That's kind of one area about building the product. Another area is around marketing and sales and selling the product and getting customer revenues. And then another area is around building your own company and hiring the people and organizing the company. So those are kind of three different skills that are really important. I mean, there's many different skills, but those three in particular are probably pretty important.
But it's very hard for us to evaluate those kind of three areas, capability of that entrepreneur at the early stage.
When they're very early, yes, and you don't always know. So you know, you might look at what things they've done before, if they've worked at other startups or if they've built other products. You might want to know, has the team worked together? So if you have 2 or 3 people, is this their first time working together, or have they worked together at another company previously? And you know, you might look at where they went to school or other jobs they have. But usually what we were looking at was what products have they built and what kind of success have they had in the past. Sometimes you're still making a bet on people who it's their first time. So again, going to be a lot of failure, but you want to see 1 or 2 or 3, you know, pieces of information. They don't have to be perfect, but you want them to not be an idiot.
Okay.
The thing was, we were also new at being investors, so we were still trying to figure out: are we good at investing? What's our process? How do we make evaluations? So it's kind of like you're trying to figure out if they're a good entrepreneur, but you're also trying to figure out if you're a good investor.
So these days, emerging technology represented by ChatGPT or AI, or Web3, what kind of new trend is coming. Could you share your thought about those kind of new technology?
Well, I'm sort of a little bit cautious because, again, I'm kind of the Oji-san, and this is all like new young kid stuff. But I think the world of crypto and Web3, building decentralized applications, connecting people who have access to money and blockchain, those are really important concepts. It's still pretty new, although that's been going now for probably 10 years, maybe a little bit more than 10 years. We saw a lot of money pour into those kinds of startups, into Bitcoin and Ethereum and other areas. Someone on our team at 500 was an early investor in Solana, which is another alternative cryptocurrency. And we saw, you know, big swings, sometimes really, and then big falls. And I think now in the last year or so, we've seen a lot of tough times in crypto. But I still feel like blockchain solutions and even cryptocurrency itself, maybe NFTs, fractional ownership, they're going to see different ways to apply those technologies. I still think there's a lot to be done and worked out. Probably we need to have better I guess assurances that these companies are not going to disappear. The underlying assets are worth something. That it's not just smoke and mirrors and people are going to take your money and run away. So I think right now there's a lot of people who have excitement about making money with crypto, but also a lot of fear about losing the money and people ripping them off. And so still need to sort of have better examples of successful companies that ensure access to your assets and then they're not going to disappear overnight. And another area probably people are looking at more is what's called stable coins, or cryptocurrencies that are pegged to a particular currency like the US dollar or other dollars, other currencies. That gives people a little bit more confidence that that money is going to be there and not disappear. But still we're experiencing bank problems and failures, and some of those like FTX and a few others, more recently Silvergate, more kind of almost traditional banking in some ways. And then just today, we've experienced some challenges with Silicon Valley Bank. One of the banks has been around here for 30, 40 years. No one expected that to happen just a couple of days ago. Now all of a sudden that's a big deal. So I think even though we have a lot of interesting technology, there's still a lot of risk. I don't think that's ever stopped Silicon Valley before from going after it, but it might give people a little bit concerned how much volatility there is in the market. Now I think we're seeing a whole nother wave of excitement around artificial intelligence and AI, and some really amazing platforms for doing generating graphic images. Now ChatGPT and others for generating text response that you might not even be able to tell that it's a artificial intelligence or computer. You might think that's a person. And really rapid adoption of that platform. I think over 100 million users in a very short period of time, less than a year. So again, I think there's a lot of promise and a lot of potential. There's also a lot of craziness and hundreds of people jumping in to do new AI startups, some of which may not be all the way there yet. None of this is really new for the Valley. We always have like a big new technology that people get excited about. Starting back with microprocessor chips in the 60s, and then disk drives and PCs in the 70s and 80s. We had the internet in sort of the 90s and 2000, and now we have social media platforms, we have video platforms, we have crypto, we have AI. So there's always going to be this period of kind of hype cycle where people get really excited, put a lot of money to work, and then reality kicks in, and some failures that really, oh no, that's not a good idea, and then gradually sort of comes back up to, okay, well, maybe we're not crazy, but maybe it's not worthless, and there's some interesting places to apply. So right now, I would say in the crypto world, we hit the high, now we're in the low. In AI, I think we're still kind of on the rise. People are like, "Oh, it's amazing, and it's going to change the world." And I think they're right. I think it is going to change the world, but maybe it's going to take a little time for us to figure out exactly what stuff is really amazing and what stuff maybe is just quick flash in the pan.
So I am investing in the Web3 startup.
Okay, how's that going?
Yeah, it's going well. I invested in the FTX Japan.
Okay.
So FTX acquired the company before they go to bankrupt.
Okay, I hope you got out before they went bankrupt.
But that is my personal investment. So personal investment and investment as a business is different.
Yeah.
So I'm new to that area. So can you give me some advice of investing in Web3 startups?
Don't do it. No. Well, I think when I started investing, I started initially putting money into companies that I kind of understood or would use the products. So for me, that was in payments company because I had worked at PayPal, maybe in consumer-focused companies because I've done some marketing. So again, SlideShare was a product to allow people to host presentations, PowerPoints and PDFs, and I did presentations and talks, and so I used the product. And it was great for me to have a way. It was very easy at the time to put presentations online and share them with people. For a company like Mint, it was very familiar, kind of looking at personal finance problems and challenges there in bookkeeping and accounting. So you start out with things that you kind of feel like you understand. And I had, like I said, background in maybe a little bit of engineering, a little bit of marketing. So those were places I started putting money together. But when I started, I was really, working or following other people who looked more experienced. So maybe Ron Conway was a famous investor who started maybe 10, 15 years before me. Josh Koppelman at First Round Capital was someone who I had met and got to co-invest alongside him. Some other people who were getting started around the same time as me. Maybe Jeff Pavier at I guess now it's called Uncorked Capital. And Felicis Ventures was another one started by him and Cedric. So I got to invest with a lot of those people who I felt really helped me understand how to do investing. Later I joined Founders Fund and worked with Peter and Sean Parker, and obviously they were very experienced in venture. And gradually over time, I got to feel like I knew a little bit more about investing. But then I also wanted to create my own style of investing and my own investment thesis. So I think probably there's a period of learning how to invest by investing alongside other experienced and smart people.
I see.
Maybe you write a small check, they write a bigger check, and maybe they're running the board or leading the investment, maybe you're following along. And over time, you kind of gradually pick up, some understanding of what to do and what structure of, deals and legal terms look like. Maybe you start developing your passions about areas that you feel like you have some experience and understanding, or maybe you spend time learning about those areas. And then you start trying, and probably you have to, go through some times where you make some mistakes and try and learn and start to gradually, hopefully get better. So that took me probably, I would say 3-4 years as an angel investor to get familiar with what investing is all about. Then another couple of years working with Founders Fund, doing more professional investments, not just my own money, but other people's money. And then at 500, so our first fund was about $30 million. Our second fund was 45, and our third fund was about 85 million. So that took about 5 or 6 years to kind of go that. So I kind of went from like 300,000 of my own money, 3 million from Founders Fund, 30 million from 500 Startups First Fund. But that was about 10 years almost, at least 8 to 10 years. So gradually stepping up to larger sums and developing what I wanted to do. And then we started really experimenting with new things that other people hadn't done. So
I see.
Doing hundreds of investments per fund, doing that internationally, running accelerator programs, investing in other funds under our umbrella were kind of different things that we were piloting, and not everything worked, but a few things did.
Okay. I understood that I can use my past experience.
I mean, you've been a successful entrepreneur and obviously built a company, I think sold a company, so you have, not very many people have done those things, so I'm sure you have lots of experience in those areas. But for me, it was a process of kind of, using job skills that I had in engineering and marketing, and then doing angel investing alongside other smart, more experienced people and gradually figuring that out. And then, okay, what's investing other people's money that's different from investing your own money, where you're investing other people's money and you have fiduciary responsibilities to them. But, probably over a period of maybe 3 to 5 to 7 years, you start to figure out kind of what you think you're good at, and then start to try and do that. Nowadays, I think people can get started in venture much easier because a lot of people with smaller funds don't have to raise as much money. Startups don't require as much money in the early days, and just a lot of the back office platforms for managing capital and things are much easier to set up now, as long as Silicon Valley Bank doesn't go into existence. But still, there's a lot more ways to get started in venture than ever before. There's a company that I'm investor in called VC Lab, which is helping other venture capitalists get started. And here in the Valley, at least, there's a lot of people who invest in both companies and funds. And maybe that's one thing that's been a little different about Silicon Valley than other parts of the world, is because we've had so many companies here in the Valley since 1950s and 60s. It's been 70 years at this point. That's probably 5, 6, 7 generations of entrepreneurs. And those successful entrepreneurs invest in other entrepreneurs and even invest in funds. And, we mentioned PayPal Mafia before, and a lot of people at PayPal became successful and entrepreneurs in other companies. YouTube, Yelp, LinkedIn. Obviously, Elon was successful with SpaceX and Tesla. And those people invested in companies that were with other people that they knew. Some of them started other funds, like Gulaf didn't start Sequoia, but joined Sequoia. Reed joined Greylock. Peter started the Founders Fund. So a lot of people got comfortable with doing their own version of entrepreneurs and investing from the people that they used to work with. And I think that same idea is now happening in other parts of the world. It's not just happening here in Silicon Valley. And when we were at 500, we started investing in places like Southeast Asia, in Latin America, in Brazil and India, in Africa and the Middle East, and also in Japan.